Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to essentially dissect what actually takes to get into Tuck. And my goal is that by the end of this process, you're going to have a much clearer picture of what Tuck is looking for and how you present yourself in your application in a way that captures who you are as a strong candidate for MBA program, but as well takes into account what are the levers, what are the lenses that Tuck is looking at when they are evaluating a candidate to, of course, help you have an opportunity to gain admission to a top 20 business school with a lot of resources that will help you pivot your career, launch your career, or just skyrocket in the area that you are interested in. So let's start with numbers. Tuck, excuse me. Tuck's admit rate dropped from about 40% in 2023 to 31% in 2024. Tuck's small size of roughly or close to 300 students means every single admit is highly scrutinized. You're not hiding in an 800 plus class of peers. You are quite visible, and this visibility, of course, raises the bar for you to be the right kind of candidate to fit the Tuck culture. So what sets Tuck apart is that it doesn't only filter by statistics, of course, they're filtering on culture predominantly. If your values and character don't resonate, you can have a 700 plus GMAT focus score and still walk away with a rejection. This is why Tuck is often harder than it looks. It's definitely not whether you can do the work. It's often the value or the admission is whether you belong in Hanover, in a cohort where fit and contribution matter just as much as capabilities. So Tuck's identity is defined by a very intimate setting, trust from peers from the community, and service. This is in New York or Chicago or LA. It's Hanover, a tight, small community where everyone knows you and reputation is built fast. The admission committee screens explicitly for three things. First, your contributions. Can you demonstrate that you invest in others, not just yourself? Second, self-awareness. Do you know who you are, what shapes you, and how that informs your leadership? And if you lack this depth, excuse me, that's a tongue twister for me, it definitely shows instantly in your application. And then third, leadership as service. Tuck defines leadership as enabling others, not just simply advancing your own career. That's why their essays probe character more deeply than most schools. They're really asking, if we admit you, do you make Tuck stronger, or do you simply use it as a platform to get to your next career stage that you're looking for? So let's dive into the essays. There are 3 required essays, and we'll go through each one from a macro level perspective, of course. So essay 1 is where most strong applicants start losing ground. The question is straightforward. Why an MBA? Why now? Why Tuck? Weak candidates fall into 2 traps. They either recycle generic language about collaboration and tight-knit community, or they write goals essays that could be dropped into any school's application and still make sense. Here's the standard that wins. You need to demonstrate a real inflection point in your career. That means showing that you hit a ceiling in your current role, or the new leadership scope you need, you cannot claim yet because you don't have necessarily the experiences or exposures that are necessary. Then you connect that inflection to Tuck specifically. Why does Hanover's environment accelerates you in a way that other schools can't without comparing Tuck with any other school. Talk about the scale, the intimacy of faculty, the peer-to-peer rigor. Don't just say that you value collaboration, because obviously that's something that anyone can claim. Show why Tuck particular, or why Tuck's brand of collaboration, built in Hanover's secluded, high trust setting, is non-negotiable for your success. Those are the kinds of applicants that win in their application at Tuck. Essay 2 is deceptively simple. Tell us who you are. The trap is obvious. Most applicants mistake this for a professional autobiography. They restate achievements that are already visible in their resume. They try to prove credibility, repeating again what was on the resume. But that's really not what Tuck is looking for in this essay. They do have your resume, and they do read the whole resume. What they're looking for is essentially your values. It's about your identity. It's about the person behind the numbers, behind the achievements. The strongest answer: take a lived experience, something formative, something personal, or even vulnerable, and connect it to the leadership character you carry today, the person you show up today in different settings. From there, you show how that identity will shape the Tuck community, how your presence will make the cohort of about 300 students stronger because of your experiences. So remember that Tuck is intimate. Every personality affects the group dynamic, right? So the AdCom is asking, do we want this person in Hanover for 2 years? Will they add to the culture, or are they going to disrupt it? And your essay has to answer yes to the first 2 questions. And that is making sure that it is concretely evident, persuasively communicated, and authentic to who you are. Now, the third essay is truly pure Tuck. It asks you to describe a time when you invested in someone else's success without immediate benefit to yourself. This is where Tuck tests whether you embody the leadership as service that they're looking for in their successful candidates. The mistake is picking an example that was transactional, helping a peer because it looked good on paper, or helped you get a promotion, or mentoring someone because it was expected of you to do so, or you were told to do so. Those answers shows obligation, not really the character that Tuck is looking for. The right example shows genuine motivation. You have empathy, you believe in someone's potential without any personal gain, or a principle you refuse to compromise that enabled you to exemplify that and illustrate that with a specific example. The impact definitely matters. Was it human? Did it change that person's trajectory? Did it leave a lasting imprint on that individual that they're now going to pay it forward after your contribution? Tuck wants to admit students who will invest in their classmates, not just themselves. Because you are in a very small-knit community, you must be able to embody this, and the way you show that is through your, specifically in Essay 3, but throughout your application. And this is definitely a direct filter for Tuck. If you can't show authentic, selfless leadership, you definitely do not embody the Tuck culture. Therefore, it's highly unlikely that you will get in. Now, let's talk about where even high caliber candidates fail. First, they rely too heavily on their metrics. A 700 plus GMAT focus score, McKinsey logo won't get you into Tuck alone. Those obviously are important pieces, but they will not be the thing that get you in. Second, they write essays that repeat the resume. That tells the committee nothing about character, nothing about what they're looking for. And third, they misuse the guaranteed interview, and I'll talk in the next slide a little bit more about that. They assume that applying early guarantees safety, when in reality, only guarantees exposure. At Tuck, these mistakes definitely can't be forgiven that easily, again, because it's such a close-knit, such a small community. If you don't demonstrate value alignment, self-awareness, humility, the probability of getting in is very, very low at Tuck. So let's talk about the guaranteed interview. This is the most misunderstood policy for Tuck or any school that has a guaranteed interview. Candidates, I hear this way too many times. They say, I am going to submit my application because it's a guaranteed interview. So for Tuck, submitting by September 3rd is in round 1. For those who are applying in round 1, offers guaranteed interview. And December 2nd for round 2, guarantees interview as well. But let's be very transparent and very clear. That is not an admit advantage. It can be definitely a test. The interview only works in your favor if your application is already strategically sound. If your essays and your positioning are weak, the interview is going to absolutely expose it immediately, and it's not going to help you get in. The admission team definitely knows this, and they expect weak applicants to apply just as well as strong applicants to apply. But for those weak ones to, try to lock in that interview so that they can have an advantage, right? Showcase that they are seriously considering Tuck. But what happens if you do this in if you submit an application that is not ready? You walk into your interview, wherever that is, virtual, in person, and you are going to crumble under the questioning because your story is not going to be coherent. Your application doesn't support the coherent story either. The guaranteed interview becomes a fast track to rejection. So the rule of thumb is use it only if your application is already airtight. Otherwise, it's really going to hurt you more than it's going to increase your chances of getting in if you try to submit a half-baked application by your target round interview guarantee period. So at C Admissions, our job is to help candidates position themselves, communicate their experiences and their value in a way that the admission team is looking for. For Tuck, that means 3 things. First, we help clarify your trajectory and prove why the MBA timing is non-negotiable. Second, we help you evaluate your identity, moving past credentials into values and experiences that define your leadership. And third, we align your contribution, or we help you align your contribution to Tuck's ethos, which is humility, empathy, and service. Our job is to help you uncover these experiences and communicate that in a way that it's what's in your mind and what's in your heart also is reflected on paper. So this is not about checking boxes. It's about positioning you as someone who Tuck is really excited to have in their community. That's the difference between an application that looks fine on paper and one that gets admitted. So I want to share a few examples of real client outcomes so you see how our strategy, not just surface metrics, move the needle at Tuck. So the first client that we have on here in the slide came from a public university with a healthcare background and a 307 GRE score and a 3.2 GPA. On paper, this candidate worried he would be screened out. What we did was reframe the value of his experiences beyond the numbers. He had completed a healthcare rotation program, so we positioned how each rotation gave him unique perspectives that could benefit the Tuck community. We also highlighted his community involvement outside of work, showing alignment with Tuck's ethos of service and contribution. The result, he applied in round 2 and was admitted, proving that even candidates with less competitive test scores can win at Tuck if those stories are positioned accurately. The second client was a consultant, also from a public university, but with a stronger academic performance and rapid professional growth in her firm. Her challenge wasn't her credibility, it was showing why Tuck specifically when she was such a strong candidate. We worked on clarifying her fit, especially around her long-standing interest in human capital and her desire to contribute to a close-knit community. That alignment resonated with Tuck, so much so that not only was she admitted, but she also received $130,000 in scholarship. What this should tell you is that when you combine strong performance with sharp cultural alignment, Tuck is very excited to have you on board, but also there can be significant funding. So when you say, oh, do I need a strong GRE or GMAT? I want you to think about these numbers. If scholarship, and obviously most people don't want to pay sticker price for an MBA, scholarship is definitely correlated to your academic and test performance. And the third client was non-traditional. She owned a small business in distribution, had dabbled in media and entertainment for over a decade, and but at the same time, was younger than the average candidate. On paper, she didn't look like a textbook MBA candidate at all. Her GRE was 320, so nothing extremely remarkable. But through our process, we uncovered her true through line, which was a deep, long-standing passion for representation in the entertainment and a track record for empowering women. She didn't have formal business background, but we repositioned her as someone who would leverage Tuck's consulting pathway to move into a field where she could scale representation and impact. She was admitted, although initially without any funding, and we helped negotiate $30,000 scholarship after admission. The through line here is definitely clear. Tuck is not only interested in raw scores or a linear resume. It's about whether your story communicates clarity, contribution, and cultural fit. What are you adding to the classroom? Each of these admits look different on paper, but reframing their narrative through Tuck's lens, they converted with offers of admission, some with scholarship, more so than others. So Tuck does not reward, as I'm sure you hear me talk about if you follow us on our socials. You hear me talk about this all the time. I could be biased, but from our very strong track record in helping applicants get into top business schools, top 20 business schools, we have seen time and again when strong applicants put half-baked, half-built applications and are surprised why they got rejected. You can't wing the process, especially when the bar is both, in this case, academic as well as cultural. So if you're serious about competing and having your best chance of getting in if you're going through this process, the next step is to book a consultation to talk about how we can determine your candidacy and how we can support you. If you are not ready for a consultation, we also do have a profile evaluation that is free of charge. You send us your resume, answer to a bunch of questions, and you get a written report, a written profile evaluation to tell you where you stack up. Make sure you include your resume because the written report comes directly from me, and that helps me really see your career trajectory. And it doesn't have to be the most up-to-date resume either. Whatever you have, it's better than not including it at all. However, if you're looking for live strategic access without the one-on-one partnership, join the MBA Strategy Circle. We're going to have next week, there's going to be another session that we're going to host. I host those live Q&As. They're hosted bi-weekly, and you get to ask real questions in a very private community. You also have access to our Slack community channel where you can talk to one another, ask questions, and you get also a live recording of our Q&As, and have access to previous ones as well, so that you can go back and see what other people's questions have been. So if you're not ready for any of those, that's totally okay. Join us, follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn, where we will be sharing a lot more content around the MBA applications. Also some master's applicants as well. So if you have friends or individuals or friends or family members who are considering graduate business school, master's degrees that are not MBAs, definitely have them follow us, because we will have more content related to that. All right, so we have about 9 minutes left. I want to dive into Q&A. If you have questions in the comment, or rather, if you have questions, write them in the comments. We have received questions in the registration, so we'll go to those as well if we have time. Okay, so a question, it's on our YouTube, so I'm just going to read it out loud and not post it on the screen. So it says, would you categorize Tuck, Darden, and Fuqua as peers for someone seeking to break into consulting post-MBA? Yeah, there would be peer schools for sure in the sort of grand scale, in the scale of the MBA top 20 business schools. Obviously, the experiences are different, although they are very much focused around community, all three of these schools. So if that's something that's really important to you, definitely make sure that you obviously apply to all of them. Recognize that one of those three schools has a very different teaching methodology, and you have to be comfortable with it. And that's Darden, which has a 100% case method approach to teaching, just like Harvard does. So you have to be comfortable with that. Not everyone is. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so let's dive into questions that came through the registration. And if you have questions and you're watching this live, please write it in the comments of whichever platform you're joining us, and we'll be addressing it live within the next 7 minutes. Okay, so how do I explain a difficult personal event that led to going off the job market for a year? Things like this happen all the time. Obviously, you have a life that you live, and there are components that can lead to you being out of work. We work with candidates like this as well. And what we have found to be successful here at SIA is that you own the leave, but talk really more about what you were doing during that period of time. 1 year, it's a very long time. And the mindset that I want you to keep in mind is that Tuck, or any school for that matter, is going to have a question as to what you were doing during this 1 year period for two reasons. One is they want to understand what kind of mindset do you have, right, as an individual. Were you learning during this period? Were you solely focused on something entirely different? Like, what was your development component that you leveraged during this year off? Second, they also want to see what your answer is going to be to employers when they ask you the same exact question when you go through interviews. So you do need to have a objective response with specific evidence of what you got yourself into during this period of time. You don't need to necessarily fully disclose your personal challenges, but I would give some kind of hint because, again, the other side are humans are reading this application, so you want to make sure that they can understand sort of where you're coming from. Why did you have to make that difficult decision to leave work for 1 year? Excellent. Let's go to the next question. So we have about 5 minutes left. As a reminder, if you found this helpful, give this video a thumbs up. We're going to try to cover all 20 business schools this cycle. We don't always do that, but this year we're going to try to do all of those. So I know some of you are finishing your applications for round 1, and some of you will be moving to round 2 or even next year. So definitely follow us on our platforms to gather insights in terms of how to put together strong applications. Okay, so next question is, how important is achieving a GMAT score that is above the average for the target school? Obviously, this is something that can help you in multiple fronts, like the case that you saw in the presentation. You know, a strong test score is going to help you not just, you know, with showing that you are ready to succeed in this program, but also showing that you are someone who is deserving of funding, that you'll be applying to higher ranked schools, and all of that is going to benefit you. Now, if you have reached a test score cap and it's at average or maybe slightly below average, I don't want you to be discouraged, because you know, you can get admitted with a score below average as well, not too below average, because again, you know, the schools do depend on rankings to attract strong candidates. So they may not necessarily go with a candidate who has you know, 500, you know, within the 500 range of test scores. But you know, if the rest of your application is exceptional, even below average can definitely work in that regard. But it's holistic, so you have to look at your profile as a whole packet, not just one data point, because they're making decisions on a holistic package. And I know that's not really that helpful, but I don't want you to think, like I've had conversations with people who are like, if I didn't get the score, I wouldn't have applied to business school because I don't want to be disappointed and be told that I can't attend because I don't have the right score. And that's not, you know, that's not true. I don't want you to feel like your application is not going to add value. But obviously, you know, anything that is less than average has to be outweighed by something else that is stronger than average. If that makes sense. All right, we're going to go with one last question. How do we ensure that my essays have a smooth, thoughtful story while addressing the question in specific detail? This comes with quite a lot of work, believe it or not. I don't think you know, anyone that's watching here can't write an essay. That's not true. Like, people can write an essay, but the question is, how much detail, how much reflection, how are you putting it all together, recognizing that every piece in the application is additive to a whole mosaic of who you are in terms of what the admission team is looking at. So first and foremost, to writing an essay, you have to think about, okay, what role does this part of the essay hold in the context of the entire application? What am I trying to communicate? What is a singular, specific example that answers this question most vividly? And then make sure that I communicate it in a way that someone who has never met me, doesn't know much about me, can fully understand who I am as a person, how I operate in that context. And that's where a lot of the work comes into play, because that is a level of nuance that you can't sit 2 weeks before the deadline and submit a strong application thinking that you'll be able to do that. So so there are multiple layers to this process, and we found that to be the most successful way, that when you read the entire application, you see a cohesive story, a really clear, evident picture of who the person is that is applying, that attracts the admission team to say, we want to invite them to an interview. And if they do well there, then we want to extend, you know, if everything works well, we're going to extend an offer of admission. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you guys being here, asking questions, both online and offline. And I wanted to remind you, next week, we're going to talk about Fuqua's MBA program. So if you are applying to Fuqua, the person that commented on YouTube mentioned Fuqua, so I'm assuming you're applying. Definitely want to join that session. Share it with your friends who are also considering or applying. Share our YouTube channel and our registrations for them as well. I will see you next week. And for those who are submitting their round one application, wish you good luck.